Imagine arriving at a place marked by stories of suffering, where the silence is interrupted by screams that echo among the tombs. This is how Jesus and his disciples landed in the region of the Gadarenes, a land that carried mystery and pain. As soon as they stepped on a dry land, they came across a man who, in everyone's eyes, had already lost everything. He lived isolated, away from society, among the tombs. His body bore the marks of his internal struggle, cuts, bruises, the result of entire nights of crying out and hitting himself with stones. This man, possessed by a legion of demons, was known for his extraordinary strength. Not even chains could restrain him, and the residents of the region, overcome by fear, avoided any contact with him. But for Jesus, this was not just a possessed man. It was a soul crying out for release. Upon seeing Jesus, he ran and prostrated himself before him, as if his pain had finally found a safe place. A mix of despair and hope took over that moment. Jesus did not see him as someone to be avoided, but as someone to be rescued. This opening scene is much more than an introduction. She shows us how Jesus sees beyond appearances, reaching the most wounded hearts and showing that, even in the midst of chaos, there is always room for redemption. At that moment, something unexpected happened. The demons, now exposed before Jesus' authority, began to beg. "Don't send us to the abyss," they cried. It was evident that despite all the evil they represented, they knew they could not resist the power of the Son of God. With a voice of despair, they made an unusual request. They wanted to be sent to a herd of pigs that grazed nearby. Pigs, animals considered unclean in Jewish culture, became the destination that those evil spirits saw as a temporary escape from their ultimate punishment. The man, dominated by forces that had consumed him for years, fell to his knees before Jesus. His posture reflected the desperation of someone who had lost control over himself. The scene was full of tension. The wind seemed to cease, the voices around were silent, and a supernatural weight took over the moment. Everyone knew that something extraordinary was about to happen. Jesus, with a look that combined compassion and authority, did not address the man, but the force that dominated him. He knew that this was not just flesh and blood, but an invisible spiritual battle. Then, in a firm voice, he asked, "What is your name?" The man, taken by evil spirits, responded with a terrifying and collective tone. "My name is Legion, because we are many." These words echoed like a cry of despair and defiance. The Legion referred to an immense number of demons that had taken control of that life, like a dark army that invaded and plundered what was left of man's humanity. Even with such an evil presence, those demons, who were sources of torment and destruction, recognized something greater. They knew they were before the Son of God. There was no resistance, just pleading. "Don't send us to the abyss," they begged. The abyss, described as a place of eternal torment, was the fate they feared most of all, for they knew that final judgment awaited them. No matter how powerful evil forces they were, before Jesus, their authority was null. They knew they had no choice but to obey his word. It was a moment of striking contrast. The possessed man, who had seemed uncontrollable, was now at the feet of Jesus, and the spirits that inhabited him, once imposing, were reduced to desperate pleas. The surrounding silence remained. The weight of that moment was testimony that, before Jesus, there is no force in the world or the spiritual that can resist his authority. As the demons pleaded for their temporary release, an unusual request was about to be made, leading to an unexpected and powerful outcome. With a firm gesture and words loaded with authority, Jesus gave permission for the evil spirits to leave the man and enter the pigs that grazed nearby. As soon as the demons took possession of the herd, something unexpected and dramatic happened. The apparent calm was replaced by a scene of pure chaos. The pigs, taken by a supernatural frenzy, began to run out of control. The animals' cries echoed across the landscape as they headed in a desperate stampede towards the nearby cliff. Without any hesitation, one by one, the pigs threw themselves into the abyss, falling into the sea. The sound of the water being broken by dozens of bodies was deafening, and within a few moments, silence once again dominated the place. For those watching, the scene was as impressive as it was disturbing. On one side was the man who moments before was a picture of absolute torment. Now he was at peace, dressed and sitting, with an expression of serenity that contrasted sharply with his previous state. His mind, once invaded by voices and chaos, was now free, reflecting the complete restoration brought about by the power of Jesus. On the other hand, the shepherds and local residents who tended the pigs were perplexed. That herd was not just a collection of animals, but a valuable part of the local economy, a source of sustenance for many families. Seeing the entire herd disappear so suddenly and inexplicably was a difficult blow to assimilate. However, what might seem like an economic tragedy had a much deeper meaning. Jesus, in his wisdom, used that act to reveal the weight of evil that lived in man. He transformed an invisible, spiritual force into something visible and tangible, making it clear that demonic oppression has a terrible cost. The message was unmistakable. The value of human life surpasses any material wealth. By allowing the demons to destroy the swine, Jesus showed that no amount of possessions or resources can equal the importance of a restored soul. As the man celebrated his new freedom, the community's reaction revealed something unexpected, a fear that led them to call for Jesus' departure. The news of what had happened spread like wildfire throughout the region. The shepherds who witnessed the event, still astonished, ran to neighboring fields and villages to report everything they had seen. Their reports carried both admiration for the miracle and astonishment at the tragic fate of the herd of pigs. With each person who heard the story, curiosity increased, and soon a crowd began to form, everyone eager to understand what had really happened. When they arrived at the location, the sight that awaited them was both impressive and disconcerting. At the center of it all was the man once known for his torment and violence. He, who had spent years living among tombs, screaming day and night and frightening everyone, was now sitting at the feet of Jesus. Dressed and calm, he looked like a completely different person. His posture was one of serenity. His expression was one of peace, something no one had ever associated with that once terrifying figure. However, for many, the scene was not a source of relief, but of confusion. What attracted the most attention was the impact of the herd of pigs that had run towards the cliff and thrown themselves into the sea. The water was now calm, but the emptiness left by the dead animals was palpable. That material loss, so sudden and irrecoverable, was difficult to accept. The power demonstrated by Jesus was something the community could not fully understand. Who was he to have such authority over evil spirits? If he could do that, what else could he do? A mixture of respect, fear, and incomprehension took over the group. The residents, worried about what else could happen, made a surprising decision. They asked Jesus to leave the area. To them, his presence, although miraculous, was also disturbing. Even in the face of the evident restoration of the possessed man, the material cost seemed to weigh more heavily on the community. Without resisting the request, Jesus accepted. He began to prepare to leave, accompanied by his disciples, leaving behind a lesson that would long echo in the minds and hearts of all who witnessed that day. But while most wanted Jesus to go away, the deeply transformed, freed man desperately wanted to remain by his side. As Jesus prepared to leave, something extraordinary happened. The man who had been freed from a legion of demons, now in full use of his reason, took an action that surprised everyone. He approached Jesus with determined steps, but full of emotion. With eyes full of gratitude, he knelt before him and pleaded, "Let me go with you." His desire was understandable. After years of living in the deepest torment, excluded from society and without hope, he had found not just relief, but a complete transformation. He wanted to remain close to the one who not only freed him, but gave him back his life, dignity, and peace. His posture was unlike anything people in the region were used to seeing. There were no more signs of despair or fury. Now, he exuded humility and devotion. However, Jesus had other plans for him. Looking directly at the man, with a mixture of firmness and compassion, he said, "Go back to your house and tell everyone what God has done for you." Jesus knew that this man had a unique mission. He did not need to physically follow him to continue the work he had begun. Your presence in the community would be a living testimony to the power of God and a reminder that no one is beyond redemption. Without hesitation, the man obeyed. He returned to his city, and wherever he went, he told his story with enthusiasm and sincerity. With each account, he described how he had been freed from something that seemed impossible. His narrative was more than words. She was a visible reflection of the transformation she had experienced. Little by little, his story began to impact those around him. People who once feared him now listened attentively, awed by the strength of his testimony and the evident change in his life. He was not just the man who had been freed from a legion of demons. He became a messenger of God's mercy and power, living proof that hope can be reborn even in the darkest places. The liberation of man at Gadara was just one of many occasions when Jesus demonstrated his absolute dominance over evil spiritual forces. Each of these stories revealed not only his power, but also his compassion in acting to restore lives. In another remarkable episode, which took place in the city of Capernaum, Jesus entered a synagogue on a Saturday. The environment was full of people eager to hear his words, attracted by the wisdom and authority he conveyed in his teachings. But suddenly, the crowd's attention was diverted by a desperate and disturbing scream that echoed through the venue. He was a man possessed by an unclean spirit. The spirit, upon recognizing the presence of Jesus, began to shout, "What do you want from us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." The excitement was immediate. Everyone present remained motionless, watching the confrontation between the tormented man and Jesus. Unlike the fear that gripped the people, Jesus remained calm. With impressive serenity and few words, he addressed the evil spirit. "Shut up and come out of him." The spirit, unable to resist Jesus' authority, let out a final scream and left the man, who was immediately free. The impact was instantaneous. The crowd, in disbelief, began to murmur among themselves. "Who is this man?" they asked. "Even evil spirits obey your voice." For these people, the scene was not just a sign of power, but proof that Jesus was no ordinary teacher. He possessed an authority that went beyond any other, capable of directly confronting the spiritual forces of evil and defeating them. The news quickly spread throughout the region. Jesus' fame as one who not only taught, but also freed began to grow even more. Each person who heard the stories was curious to know more about him, and the impact of their actions went beyond physical barriers, reaching distant places. These displays of power not only liberated individuals, but also transformed entire communities, leading people to question their priorities and reflect on the value of spiritual restoration. In the miracles Jesus performed, an intriguing pattern emerged. People's reactions to witnessing his works often revealed his priorities. These events not only transformed individual lives, but also exposed how people dealt with the spiritual versus the material. In the region of Gadara, the restoration of the possessed man was an extraordinary event. He who had previously lived in absolute torment was now seated, clothed, and in his right mind. It was impossible to deny the magnitude of the transformation. However, instead of celebrating this miracle, many in the community were focused on the loss of the pig herd. That herd represented a significant source of income for the local economy. The sight of the animals throwing themselves into the sea and the material impact of their loss seemed to weigh more than the human life that had been restored. This reaction exposed an uncomfortable truth. The spiritual value of man's liberation was obscured by concern about the financial impact. The presence of Jesus, which had brought liberation and redemption, became a source of discomfort. Fear of the unknown and attachment to what was tangible led the community to ask Jesus to leave. In Capernaum, where Jesus also demonstrated his dominance over evil spirits, the impact was different. The miracle performed in the synagogue generated astonishment and admiration. The people marveled at Jesus' authority, wondering, "Who is this that even evil spirits obey his voice?" However, not all of these questions resulted in faith. Many saw miracles as impressive, but did not delve into the spiritual meaning behind them. These two scenarios reveal a clear contrast. While Jesus offered liberation and spiritual restoration as a gift of eternal value, people were often more concerned about what they could see, touch, or lose. The pigs in Gadara and the amazement in Capernaum were different manifestations of the same challenge: to see beyond the immediate and understand the true purpose of Jesus' work. Jesus, however, remained steadfast. His message was clear. The value of human life and spiritual transformation will always be greater than any material good or passing curiosity. He continued to act with authority, showing that the redemption of a soul outweighs any earthly loss. These extraordinary events, in addition to directly impacting freed individuals, provoked debates and reflections in entire communities, expanding the discussion about who Jesus really was. The miracles of Jesus went far beyond the moment they occurred. Each deliverance and healing transformed lives so profoundly that people felt compelled to share what they had experienced or witnessed. These stories were not just accounts of supernatural events. They were invitations for others to encounter the transformative power of Jesus. The man delivered in Gadara was a remarkable example of this. When he asked to follow Jesus, he was given a different mission. Go back to your home and tell everyone what God has done for you. This calling was not a rejection, but a specific task. That man, whose life was now a living testimony of God's power, was sent back to his city to be a witness among his own people, those who had known him as a tormented soul and now saw him restored. This mission was not unique. Throughout Jesus' ministry, many who were healed or delivered began to share their stories. These testimonies spread from person to person, crossing villages, cities, and entire regions. They sparked curiosity in some, faith in others, and even opposition from those who feared the change Jesus was bringing. In Capernaum, for instance, the deliverance of the possessed man in the synagogue quickly became the talk of the town, creating a buzz that expanded Jesus' fame even further. The authority with which he cast out evil spirits was something people had never seen before. Those who witnessed the power of Jesus could not keep what they had seen to themselves. These stories not only changed the lives of those touched by Jesus, but also profoundly impacted the surrounding communities. Each testimony acted as a spark that ignited debates, challenged traditions, and questioned long-held certainties. People who had been bound by rigid beliefs or resigned to hopelessness found themselves confronted with something new and undeniable. "Who is this man?" they asked one another. "How can he have such authority over things none of us can control?" The transformation Jesus brought went beyond the visible. It wasn't just bodies that were healed or torments that ceased. It was the awakening of something spiritual, profound, and eternal. The impact of Jesus, however, was not limited to his physical actions. He healed not to display power, but to show that something greater was at stake: the kingdom of God, accessible to all who believed. His words carried a power that transcended time and space. With every sermon and every parable, he planted seeds of compassion, forgiveness, and faith that continued to grow long after he had left. Those who shared their stories became living witnesses, tangible examples that change was possible. They were like lighthouses, illuminating the path for others in darkness, searching for hope, healing, or simply something to believe in. Their voices could not be ignored, and their renewed lives spoke even louder. They were not merely healed or delivered individuals. They were messengers of a transformation that could touch anyone willing to hear and believe. Just as these stories echoed in the past, they continue to resonate today, crossing generations and borders, transforming lives, and inspiring new testimonies. They remind us that the impact of an act of love, compassion, and faith is never confined to the present. And what about you? Have you ever stopped to think about the impact a story of transformation can have? Perhaps it's your turn to be a lighthouse in someone's life. Don't let this message stop here. Share this video, leave a comment, and inspire others with this story of transformation. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more content that strengthens faith and brings hope. You could be the next person to make a difference in someone's life.